Welcome back to another episode of the Record Shepherds.
Welcome back, everybody. How you doing?
We're doing great. Audience members might know something slightly different today.
Yeah, for those of you watching on YouTube, you will see that we have a guest joining us on the sofa. We have Matthew Tilley, Head of Artist and Industry Development at beatBread.
Clap it up, clap it up. You can clap for yourself.
I'm not clapping for myself.
Fair enough.
Welcome, Matthew. I hope you're feeling settled on the sofa.
It's very comfy.
Good. It's we intend it to be that way.
Am I a rose between two thorns or a thorn between two roses? We can discuss that
depends
later.
on the day.
Yeah.
I think some days Jason for me is a thorn, some days he's a rose. So
a prince amongst roses.
There you go. Why don't we talk about a little bit why we have Mr. Matthew on the couch today?
Yeah, well, as some of our regular listeners will be aware at this stage, the whole concept of the Record Shepherds podcast is to bring industry knowledge to independent artists and people looking to get ahead in the music industry, forge a career in the music industry, but don't always have the access to the business side and all of that side of the music industry.
What a fine endeavour, guys, by the way. Not trying to ingratiate myself early, but
wow.
Giving advice without expecting anything in return, I think that's a pretty cool thing to do.
Yeah, well, I think it's thank you for that.
Thank you
for that, and hopefully we doing a good job of that. But that's the goal. And we've talked about many different aspects of different areas of interest, let's say, or things that independent artists will have to know and understand how to navigate within the music industry. But one that we have not yet touched upon, and I guess I'm excited to sort of to delve further into this because it's a reality, right? It's an unfortunate reality, but it is a reality that you've got to fund your career.
Definitely.
Right? And, what does that mean? I guess
things cost money.
Things cost money, and in this day and age, things cost more money. I would say that for most of the independent artists that I know, at some point when they're starting out, they're hustling, right? They're doing the music thing, but they've also got to pay the bills. They've got to put food on their plate and pay the rent. And that usually involves holding down one job, often a second job. Definitely. On top of that, and then you got to find time to do the music thing. And man, that's tough. That's like it's a lot, but I think that's really where you, not to use the shepherd pun, but that does separate the sheep from the goats, right? Because definitely. It's how much do you want it, and after you've done a full day at work and you've done your second job or whatever, are you really that committed to delve into the music and get creative, right? Especially, man, it's a lot of the time you have to be in a certain headspace to be totally creative, but if you really want it, and those that do will go ahead and push through, and you got to do all that. So funding, whether it's for recording costs, whether it's for touring,
merch,
marketing, your equipment, it all costs money. And yeah, you can get smart about what you're actually making what you're choosing as your sort of essential expenditure. You can get smart with all that, but you can't get away from the fact that you have to invest into your career, and you should consider it as an investment. So that's roughly what we're here to talk about. And I think before, back in the day, you hit a point, let's say, let's go back a little bit, you will hit a point in your career, well, yeah, you're doing it all yourself, but you will want investment, right? I'd like to actually kick on to the next level. And it used to be that it was essentially the sole domain of record labels to invest in artists' careers. But as things have changed and the digitization of music, etc., there's more and more ways to get your music out there. It's not necessarily all through record deals. And similarly, the monopoly that record labels had on funding artists' careers has also dissipated. And that's what we'd love to talk a little bit to Matthew about today. Matthew's been doing a lot of work in this space for independent artists, and very excited, Matthew, to talk a little bit about that.
Definitely, and we're going to dive deep into that, but before we do, how are you, Matthew?
I'm great.
Yeah.
It's a little cooler today, right? It's been really, really hot in New York.
It's been burning up. Yep.
Yeah.
What's your summer been like?
Lots of fun. I was lucky enough to see Taylor Swift. I saw
yay!
Matchbox 20 a couple of weeks ago. Just saw some Premier League soccer this weekend down in Baltimore. So been out and about.
Was that at Centerfield, the Matchbox 20 show?
No, the PNC Bank Arts Center.
PNC Bank Arts. Okay.
New Jersey.
So it's safe to say that you're a music fan.
Yes.
Okay. So maybe you can walk us through your career in music. What brought you to the music industry? What made you say, I not only want to be a concert goer, but somebody who actually dedicates my life to this thing called the music industry?
Yeah, great question. So I studied business studies at college, university, school, whatever you want to call it. And then I graduated with a business studies degree, and I sort of still didn't really know what I wanted to do at that point. I went and worked a couple of jobs, and I sort of found them vaguely uninspiring. And it sounds hilarious now, but looking around at people in their 40s and being like, oh my God, like if I'm still here when I'm 40, I might want to kill myself. It's just, it's just in ordinary office jobs, right? But it's just, to me, this was just uninspiring. And I was lucky enough to sort of have an opportunity to take a little career break, which sounds ridiculous because I was like 23 or 4 or something. But it just I was exhausted. No, it just happened. Anyway, never mind. But the point was I had a minute to actually stop and make a decision about, okay, what do I want to do next? With the benefit of having a degree and a couple of years of work experience. And I read some books and I did some thinking, and literally, this, as dumb as this sounds, guys, it was like, well, I'm kind of good at business and I really like music. I wonder if there's a thing called the music business.
Ding, ding, ding. Light bulb went off.
Simple as that. And obviously I was like obsessed with listening to music and buying CDs, again, dating myself, like going to shows and all that stuff. And then this sort of realization like, oh wait, there's a whole industry behind this. And it is actually a business. And I've studied business and I actually had a marketing specialism as part of my business studies degree. And I was like, I'm going to go take a run at that. And I was literally like, I said to myself, I'm not going to work again until I found a job in the music business. And like lots of people, I managed to get like a couple of weeks cover for somebody who was on vacation, I think, and then I got some cover. No, I think some cover. Somebody was on maternity leave for like they had 3 months off, so I got a 3-month job covering somebody's spot, and then that turned into a 6-month thing, and then that turned into a full-time job, and blah, and then then stuff happens, right? And if you're any good, hopefully people notice you and you get other things happening and all that. So that's the early piece.
So we talked about artist funding. Did you have experience seeing how artists were funded from like a record label perspective? And was there anything about that process that you seemed frustrated with, or did you even know it was a problem at the time?
Not really, to be honest, because back then that was just the status quo, right? As Jason said, our labels have lost the monopoly on that. But back then that was just how it was. And if you wanted to become famous, you had to be signed to a record label in 99.9% of cases anyway. And if you wanted, you also just think about recording, right? It used to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to make an album. Now you can make it in your bedroom. So you had to be funded. And the record labels were the only people that did it. So it just sort of wasn't a question. The only bit you kind of noticed was the artists that were getting dropped hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and just kind of realizing that, wow, that must kind of suck.
That is a weird thing to realize when you start working with artists, especially when you're working on projects that you kind of get a little bit attached to, right? And then, but you realize at the end of the day, it's a business, and if your boss says no, they're not making money, they're gone.
Yeah.
That could be quite depressing, actually. When like as a music fan, when you find out that like ultimately, no surprises, it's like it is a business, and the economics have got to make sense a lot of the time. But when you find that out, when that dawns on you for the first time, it is kind of depressing. But hey,
I think again back then, so many artists would celebrate, as they should, when they got signed. I was like, getting signed is just the first piece of the puzzle, guys. You've got like still, even now, you have a 1 in 10 chance, roughly, of actually becoming a big. And now that it's democratized, right? There's so much more opportunity, and you don't have to get signed to get there, and all those things. But it was just I thought it was such a weird, false mountaintop to reach. Like, I got signed, we made it, and you're like, no, you didn't. This is actually where the real hard work starts.
And that's an interesting false mountaintop, because statistically, most artists who get signed don't quote unquote make it, as maybe people would think like the term making it means, right? But for whatever reason, that perception is out there. Literally, you're in a contract, you're making a deal with a company, and they give you something, and in return you give them something. But for some reason,
you give up almost everything, right? You actually sign away the ownership of your music. In most cases, record deals are progressing and blah, blah, blah. But certainly in the old days, when you signed that record deal, they owned everything your voice was recorded on forever.
Yeah.
And I think at one point it used to be like they owned it for the Earth or something, and then they've updated it to say they own it for the universe.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. World,
right.
World
It used to be
universe.
world, right? And now it's universe.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of rights they're taking.
Yeah, totally. And although that is changing, there's still a lot of deals where that is the case, right? So
and by the way, if you are hell bent on being, I'm doing air quotes, but Ariana Grande or Drake or The Weeknd, there probably is no better place to become that than on a major label.
Yeah, fully agreed.
You got to know what you're giving away and what the odds are of that happening. And everything's a trade-off in life, right? Pretty much. So,
Yeah.
And I feel like at some point in the 2000s, maybe we can call it the streaming era or just the internet, there was a rise in media, particularly of feeding information to independent artists, like across YouTube, across any multitude of platforms. Was beatBread sort of founded within like just that era of just trying to get as much information to independent artists and trying to provide an alternative platform than major labels, or was it like maybe earlier than that or post that?
No, it was later, Tim. So where we are now, just for anybody who's listening to this long in the future, it's July 2023. July 2023.
And the humans are still in charge.
yeah, for now.
At the moment. We came together sort of early 2020, just as the pandemic was hitting. Our website, kind of as it is today, launched in November of 2020. So we're about 3 years old, right? But if I can just sort of talk about that for a second, streaming changed everything, and I think mostly in a good way. I don't want to get in the whole debate about streaming should pay artists more. There is an argument there, but one of the data points that we looked at said, and I'll try and say this slowly and simply, but it's not that complicated, but if you take a universe of artists who make $50,000 a year or more from their recorded income, right? So forget merch, forget tickets. People who are earning $50,000 a year or more from recorded income. This data point said that 10 years ago, there was about 10,000 artists that fit in that category. Today, there's about 25,000 artists that fit in that category. And by the end of the decade, there's forecast to be between 50 and 60,000 artists that fit in that category. Absolutely would not have been possible without streaming, right? Because you rewind to the days when if you wanted to make a living from your music, and if we're calling $50,000 a year a living, which I think in most places except New York City probably is, right?
Yeah.
If you call that a living, the only way you could make a living from music really before that was to be signed to a label, and they were going to get your record on the radio and your CD into Target and Walmart and HMV and what was it called? Anyway, record stores. You know what I'm talking
Before
about.
my time.
Right? It was record labels were the only game in town. Really, you could probably be a local successful artist who played the local bar scene and sold some CDs. Right, you probably make a living. But other than that, record labels were the only game in town. So it was really streaming that democratized this business and allowed so many more artists to actually have a meaningful career. And of course, there are, as we said, about 25,000 artists today making a living. Of course, there are tens and tens of thousands who aren't making a living who would love to be. So I'm sure they're mad, but it's way better than it used to be for an independent artist. I haven't got close to answering your question, have I? But
no, you did.
Wanted to sort of give that context of. So, should I go on to the next part, which is our origin story?
Well, we could talk about the origin story. I think we can move back a bit as well, and just maybe talk about what the heck is beatBread, and what is it that you guys are trying to solve?
That's a great question. beatBread is a funding solution for independent artists. We are just trying to give more options to people who need funding to get to the next stage of their career. We're not the right answer for everybody. We don't have an answer for everybody even, right? We advance against streaming income. So we look at what your streaming's done to date. We have a very complicated algorithm that predicts what it's going to do into the future, and we make an advance on that. So we predict what you're going to earn over the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and you kind of choose how much of that money you want to take today. So it's purely funding. I just want to say at this point, we think services for artists are really important. It's really important to have a great manager, a great marketing team, a great PR person. We've specifically chosen not to do any of that. Not because we don't think it's important. We think it's really important, and we don't want to do it in an average way.
Yeah, do you know, when we were, Tim and I were doing a little bit of a dive in and playing around with the website and just getting a feel for, how it would work, and if we were approaching it as an independent artist, how it would feel. And we actually talked about that. We were initially thinking, I wonder, is there a distribution arm to this as
automatically,
well?
right?
And when we realized that there was not, we both commented on how refreshing that was, because just do one thing and do it well.
Right. People tell us all the time, you guys should get into distribution. We could, but we'd probably do an average job at it, right? And we actually think unbundling is the most likely way to get you the best possible outcome as an artist. What do I mean by that? A record label used to bundle the funding, the services, and the distribution all together, right? Distributors still, in some cases, will bundle the distribution and the funding, or the distribution and the services. We think, as an artist, being able to choose each of those things individually and find the right person and the right team, actually may be more important to have the choice to fire any of those people, right? When you take it all as a bundle, you can't say, I don't want to work with that person anymore. You're not doing good enough, because you've taken the advance, your distribution's there, everything's all in one place. By unbundling it and making those decisions individually, we think you have much more control, and you're much likely just to be happier, frankly.
Yeah,
because you're more in control of the situation.
Yeah, I agree. Nothing can be too big to fail, essentially.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you all start in 2020, but you obviously identified this need maybe a little bit before as an alternative funding source for independent artists. So maybe walk us through what that origin story is. Talk about, what got you into it, why you felt that you were the ones that needed to solve the issue,
So I'm going to sort of talk about my boss for a minute, because he's really he is the main founder, and it was his brain that was sort of the idea behind this. So Peter Sinclair, and his origin story is there's a video on our YouTube channel if you want to really dive into it and hear him tell it. But he calls himself an accidental participant in the music business. So he'd worked in McKinsey for some years. He'd worked in a bunch of different venture-backed startups. He'd never worked in music. And in about 2014 or 15, I think, he got a call from a headhunter. Universal Music is looking for somebody to come in and run a division. They specifically want somebody who's never worked in music before, right? And so, I know, which is risky, but trust me, I've been in the music business 20-something years, and I've seen people come in from outside before. It often doesn't end well.
No, 100%.
Because we music business people tend to try and eat them alive. It's mostly what happens. Anyway, so Peter came in, and he was there to run what they call consumer engagement. Think of it as the superfan division, right? So anywhere that Universal was touching the consumer directly, whether their artist website or their mailing list or their merchandise store or their VIP program or their fan clubs or all those things, was all sort of brought together under Peter. And he was really shocked. I wasn't shocked. You wouldn't be shocked. You guys wouldn't be shocked that, as he puts it, half of the artists he was sort of given that you could go work with these guys didn't want to have anything to do with any of it, right? He was like, we're Universal Music. You signed here. All these services are available to you for free.
Mm-hmm.
I say free. You've given up a lot, right?
Yeah.
You've given up a lot, but they're all bundled in.
They're part of the package.
And you don't want to use them. Like, huh?
Yeah.
So he sort of was casting around for answers, and lots of people tell him, no, you're doing great, and the business was growing, and I went to work for Peter there at that time, so that I was sort of part of growing that division. It was all going well, but he was still really baffled, and especially some managers kind of almost being angry with him before he walked in the room, as he puts it, right? It's just like, don't try and sell me on your nonsense. I do all this myself. He went directly to some of the label presidents for coaching, as he puts it, and said, look, what am I doing wrong? And after having had this conversation a few times, one of them said to him, look, if you really want to know, it's not just your services they're turning down. Some of these artists don't want to work with our radio person, our PR person, our digital like the core staff. They have their own people. And Peter blurted out, what are we, just a check to some of these people? And the guy he was talking to literally laughed at him like you just
Eureka!
Great
ding,
reenactment.
ding.
And if there was a moment when, the sperm hit the egg or the light bulb went off or whatever in his head, that was the moment when he was just like, some artists just need funding.
Mm-hmm.
Logical conclusion. There's got to be a better way.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I'll pause there because that was sort of long, and there's what I can tell you what happened next, but that was the insight to the business of like some artists know how to do everything themselves. The only reason they're going to a major label is to get a check to fund it.
But that's sort of a paradox, right? Because there are artists who do just want funding, and they sign these contracts that they know are terrible, but then at the same time have an underlying mistrust for the company that they just gave all their rights to, right? I wonder why that is.
They were stuck there. Well, I think it goes back to what I was talking about, the bundling, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you sign, first of all, you're giving up the rights to your music, but secondly, you're being forced to work with a whole team of people, and lots of those people are great, but maybe they just don't get you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they subconsciously make it clear they don't like your music, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not great.
Mm.
So I would say that's probably why. I'd also say that artists, and I love artists, and I've worked with lots of them, but they're all slightly mad in some small way.
Definitely.
And they're all generally unsatisfied most of the time, which is what they need to be, right? You have to have unbelievable drive and passion, but that's sort of going to lead you to think that no one cares as much as you do, and no one's working hard enough, and the results are never quite.
Yeah, which is paradoxically kind of should be true. Like that, you should be the person, like you will be the person who cares the most. But you do want to surround yourself and find a team with people who care a lot, right? About, and especially when it comes to a manager, for example, and certainly your record label, right? The people who are going to be primarily responsible for driving your music to the masses, and all the good stuff that a record label, when it's functioning as it should, is able to do. But you are right. There are just times where a lot of these artists, they don't need all of that, and then it can be as much of just like a relationship thing, or we've all been at record labels when a specific A&R signs the act, and then 6 months later they're not around, and then someone inherits that act, and it doesn't feel like there's that same passion necessarily, and
that's pretty common.
I mean, unfortunately, it's just a reality. So this was the eureka moment, basically, of do they just want to check? That's funny looking back on that. God, I can imagine having like that sort of same ding ding ding, and then it obviously went from there.
Yeah, so then he would, I think this probably while he was still at Universal, don't tell them, but they're not listening. He went and licensed a giant data set from what's called Luminate, now used to be called Nielsen, the charts company, basically, and found some data scientists and basically gave them this challenge of like, with enough data, can you accurately predict an artist's future streaming income, right? Because if the data is good and the algorithm is good and you can predict their income, you're no longer working on the record label model of, I'll give an advance to 10 artists and hopefully one will make enough money to pay for the other 9 which are going to fail, right? Roughly, that's the record business model, right?
Yeah.
Which is frankly why record deals are so, again, air quotes, terrible to artists, because the label needs to make an outsized share because 90% of the artists they sign are failing, right? Again, this is a very old sort of way of thinking about it, but I don't think the record business has changed that much. If you can predict what they're going to make in the future, and therefore you only advance what you're sure that they're going to earn back, then you can offer much fairer terms to the artists, right?
Yeah.
So that was the interest in the data. Will the data science give us enough information to make good predictions?
Yeah.
So these data scientists locked themselves in the room for 6 months, metaphorically, but you know what I mean, and came out and said, yeah, we actually think we've cracked it. And they back tested it 30,000 times. So you take an artist today, you go back and you look at what their data was 5 years ago, you run the model on it, what did the model say they would have happened to them over the next 5 years? And you actually have the data to compare it to, right? So you can see if you're right or not. So back testing. Eventually there was enough data to say, yeah, we can actually do this pretty accurately. And then we went and raised some money to go and offer to artists. And we did our first few deals just manually, like sending people spreadsheets and all that stuff to get it up and running, test out the contract, make sure everything worked. And then we led to launching the website at beatBread.com, folks, beatBread.com. That launched in around Thanksgiving 2020. So,
and you would say that the process of using data-backed information to make an informed decision on signing artists is not a traditional record label model.
I think data has come more and more into it, but I think there's still, I think labels will sort of pride themselves on, we use a combination of data and human belief, which I actually think is kind of great, right? I love the idea still in a world of data that there are still people with golden ears or that incredible belief who go, you know what? I'm going to put $1 million on the table for this artist because I see a glimmer in the data, but I believe we can do this, this, and this with them, right?
Yeah.
beatBread doesn't believe anything, right? Well, I guess we believe we offer great options in funding for artists, but we never tell an artist, oh, we believe in you, we think you're great. We just run the data on them.
Yeah, you're kind of agnostic to that sort of like everything else except the data.
Right. But I'd say the upside of that is we don't care where you live. We don't care what genre of music you make. We don't care what you look like. We don't care how old you are. We don't care about any of the things that a label might be looking at, right?
Yeah.
We just look at the data.
I think that's actually super cool to hear that as an artist, because that there are a lot of the things where traditionally a record label will look to those things when it's basing, what's the longevity of the career, when they're determining like how old or young an artist is, and obviously genre can be a defining factor.
Yeah, well, and one of the reasons, Jason, is because they can only sign a limited number of artists, right? Because they're actually going to work those artists. Again, sort of the beauty to us of our model, where we don't do the work, we just provide the funding. We can sort of provide funding for unlimited numbers of artists, right? So again, the label's got to make sure that they're signing the right thing, define right to them as looks right, feels right, lives in the right place, makes the right genre of music, all of those things. We just don't care. Right? Yeah.
I mean, you're right, and it's like, I like to say, I like to think of it as more, you're agnostic to that, right? It's like, just because
that's a much nicer way.
That's it. Yeah, you do care. I know you care, Matthew. but no, that I didn't actually think about it like that when we were doing the research, but that's exactly what it is. It's just like, because you're not providing those services, this is uniquely a funding solution, and then as long as the data makes sense, and there are certain parameters which we can talk about to qualify for that, well then why it makes absolute sense. Why shouldn't you fund that particular artist based on what the data is telling you? And data is coming in more and more to the music industry. I mean, I think it's fair to say that historically the music industry has not been quick on the uptick when it comes to technology, and it took Apple basically to turn around, like a software company to turn around the music industry with the invention of iTunes, and obviously Spotify following on from that. But a lot of the sort of valuation terms, and maybe it is because there's record execs sort of see some sort of a place for that je ne sais quoi, shall we call it, as to like a potential or like just a glimmer of talent in an artist that, to be fair, maybe has not materialized into statistics yet at that point. So but the very fact...
Just give you one little example, Jason. I was lucky enough to work with Katy Perry for several years. I worked on her first 2 albums from a marketing side, not musical at all. But she'd been dropped certainly once, possibly twice, right, by other labels that had signed her, and it hadn't worked.
Yeah.
And our boss is an amazing guy called Jason Flom. Probably check him out on Instagram if you haven't, because he's just a fascinating character in many, many ways. But anyway, Jason saw something, was just like, I'm going to sign this artist. Now, you could say somebody that's already been dropped, like I said, I forget whether it was once or twice, but 1 or 2 other major labels have been like, nope, can't make this work. To go and say, I am going to make this person the biggest artist in the world in the next couple of years, it's incredible, actually.
Yeah. And look, from that's something at that time the stats wouldn't have been telling him, but no stats. Yeah.
But what's the funny thing about that, though, especially with a lot of executives, we never talk about the times that they miss. Right? It's like statistically, it's always about the big winners, because if you do sign a lot of artists and one of them becomes a Beyonce or a Katy Perry or a Taylor Swift, then there's not really much else you have to say. You were right. You were proven right. You got the golden ear. But I think what's cool about the dances, especially with the beatBread model, is that it does leave. There's no room for discrimination, right? There's no room for somebody to interpret your success based off of what they've experienced in the past, hoping that it'll repeat itself again.
Yeah.
Right. It's purely based off of the work that you've done as an independent artist, and almost puts more onus back on you, saying if you want this funding, if you want this much ownership of your career, then you have to hit a certain metric to be able to get the money.
And I'd also say to that point, Tim, we'll never take credit for an artist's success. You'll never see us being like, we signed them when nobody believed in them, and it's like with the bank.
With
that's funding. That's it.
That's what I was going to say. But the advantage that potential customers of beatBread have, and our listeners, independent musicians out there, is that you are music people in the music space, and you understand how the music industry works. So it's not quite like just going to the bank. Like, good luck going to the bank and showing them your road. Yeah, exactly.
Your bank manager and applying for a loan. Yeah,
So
I hope one day the world's like that, right? That the streaming is sufficiently seen as stable and reliable and all those things that you will be able to get a bank loan. But right now, probably.
Yeah, you're certainly filling that gap in the market.
I would love at this point to get maybe a little bit deeper into the product itself. So I'm an independent artist. I've heard about beatBread. I want to fund my career without going through a record label. What are the criteria that I have to meet to get funding from beatBread?
So our algorithm will give you a result, and it's basically everything's online, right? So I have a team of people that work for me that talk to artists, and we'll get on a Zoom call and answer questions and email and the rest of it. But essentially, there's an online product at beatBread.com. We go and sign up. The algorithm will give you offers if you're making about $100 a month in streaming income. And as we've talked before, there are tens and tens of thousands of artists that fall into that category. There's going to be some people listening that don't, and sorry, but we make an advance against your income below $100 a month. There's not a lot to make an advance against, right? And then I can talk about it more, but then we give you a lot of choices about what kind of deal you want to take.
Do you have to have any particular like subscribership or monthly following or anything like
You'll
that?
You'll find $100 again. It can vary, right? Because if you're a big artist in Nigeria, you will probably be having most of your listeners on Boomplay, So but
the royalty rates,
right? And so it's different by country and all this. But $100 a month for a big chunk of artists means they've probably got 10,000-ish monthly listeners on Spotify.
Got you. Okay.
Right? And again, maybe they're really big on Apple and they're not big on Spotify, or they're some other streaming service, Deezer or Tidal or whatever it is, right? But Spotify is sort of a rough measure, about 10,000 monthly listeners. And again, it depends a lot on intensity of fandom and momentum and all these things that the algorithm looks at. But if you've got 10,000 monthly listeners on Spotify and or you're making about $100 a month in streaming income, you'll probably see an offer from our system.
Cool. So the Record Shepherds, we decide to put out an album because Jason and I decide we're not going to do podcasts anymore. We want to be independent artists.
I'm not sure.
And we can finally experiment with all those genres that record labels have been holding us back from.
Yeah. Alpaca, alternative, electronic music. And then we hit a point, we're making about $100 a month. We got, 10,000 monthly listeners.
For about 6 months.
For about 6 months. So there's a consistency.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Consistency, exactly.
Got it. So you guys have this dynamic advanced model. What does that look like, and how are we able to customize that?
Yeah. So you'll see. You go to the website, artist name and email address. That'll get you started. Takes us half an hour, generally the first time, to pull in all the data we need about you, and then you'll come back to the site and you'll see a bunch of choices that you get. The first choice is, do you want to just get funding against your catalog, so stuff that's already out? And if you choose that, anything you'd release in the future we wouldn't touch. Or do you want to add 5 new songs or 10 new songs or more than that to the advance that you're going to get? The second choice is, how long do you want this deal to be? And we're generally offering 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 8 years. Obviously makes a massive difference to how much of an advance you can get, whether we're buying your income, right? I should have said that, but that's how the deal is structured. So we're buying your income. So are you selling us 1 year of income, 2 years of income, 3 years of income, or 5 years of income? That's up to you, but will massively affect the result. And then the last choice we give you, currently, there are more coming, but the last choice we give you right now is, do you want to keep a percentage of your income? So imagine you're making, $3,000 a month in streaming income, and you're relying on your streaming income to pay your rent, which is $1,000 a month. You can choose to keep 30% of your income off the top before we're looking at it, right? So we give this cash flow through, we call it, but the opportunity to, you don't have to give up all of your streaming income if you're relying on it to pay certain things. It's really up to you. All these choices are up to you. And then you'll see all of these choices every time you're moving these sliders around, and it'll make so much more sense if you look at it, guys. But you move the sliders around, every time you move the sliders around, the dollar amounts change, the recoupment rates change, all these things change on the other side of the screen. So everything's a trade-off, basically.
So like, if in that scenario, if I'm an artist making $3,000 and I say I only want $2,000 of my income, of my streaming income to be recoupable for the advance that you gave me, you guys have that option. Yes. So where I can still use that $1,000 to pay my rent, and the deal is basically just for that set amount of money.
You do not need to give up all of your streaming income.
Wow.
Yeah, I love that. I love the flexibility. And what I would say for anybody who wants to go check out the website, beatBread.com, have a little play around with it. You'll get a feel for, like, I think immediately Tim and I were struck just about how user-friendly the interface is, and there's a lot of like helpful videos that like demonstrate and walk you through exactly how the model works, essentially. And it's just super easy to play with and get a feel with. And obviously, as you say, Matthew, as you adjust just the parameters and the variables, obviously the amount that you can be advanced as an artist will vary. But I just found super easy. It kind of gave me confidence, and it was like, this is just like, would be a dream for a lot of like artists looking for funding, and just like gives you that sort of confidence that you're dealing with a credible organization. And as you say, you get all these benefits of being able to retain ownership of your music, and still be able to use the various service providers that you might already have built into your team. Yeah.
So I think it's safe to assume if I'm an independent artist and I'm going to beatBread, I'm probably distributing my music independently anyway. Is there an easy way that like the information from my independent distributor goes to beatBread?
I mean, not a super easy, seamless way.
Okay.
But there are instructions on the site to how to download reports from about, I think, 20 or 30 different distributors. I love just talking about DistroKid, because they make it so easy. I think it's 3 clicks. You go to Wallet, and then you click on See Excruciating Detail, which one day I need to find the person at DistroKid who wrote that on their website and go give them $5 for being so smart. And then you click download. So yeah, in most cases, it's literally you download the report from your distributor, and then you drag and drop it on our site. And I would say we're very mobile friendly. When you get to that stage of the process, the uploading reports, you probably want to do it on a laptop. It's a little, there's no easy way to make that seamless on mobile. So not totally seamless, Tim, but if it takes you more than 5 minutes, something's gone wrong.
Wow. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, no, it is. Like it sort of just felt like, well, obviously, I think this is where was it Peter you were talking about initially that had the background and the sort of like the marketing side of the business?
The beatBread is sort of a happy combination of Peter, who's been involved in various startups but is really a consumer marketer at heart. His co-founder John is a data scientist.
Yeah, makes
John
sense.
had never worked in music before. He's built models in energy markets and insurance markets and all these things. It was just purely a data question for him. And I'm the guy that's been 20 plus years in the music business, and those hopefully a bit about how artists think and managers and lawyers and how the music business works. That's sort of how it all came together. Just to talk about the website for one more second. So you put an artist name. If you qualify, you'll see that page we're talking about with the sliders. Just really important just to talk people through that process for a second. At that point, you're seeing estimates from us. We've asked you a couple of questions about your monthly income and what tracks we can include. If you've answered those correctly, those estimates will probably be pretty good. But then we jump to what you were just talking about, where we ask you to upload your reports. That's where we really dig in. We machine read all those files. It's normally tens and tens of thousands of lines of data. And we're aiming within a couple of days to come back to you and show you that same screen with all those sliders, but instead of saying estimates, it's going to say confirmed offers. Right? And at that point, you can move those sliders around, knowing every single offer on the screen is a confirmed offer, and you can pick the one you want and move forward from there. So that's the sort of, you come to the site and sign up. It takes a couple of minutes. You wait half an hour, you see estimates, you upload your reports, you wait a couple of days, then you see confirmed offers.
Yeah.
And I was just going to say, and just to clarify, throughout that whole process, even with the contract signing, at no point am I, as an independent artist, giving away ownership of any master recordings?
Very good and important point, Tim. We think ownership is so important for artists, and I touched on it earlier, but our contract says we are purchasing your revenue. It's called a revenue share purchase agreement. That's the actual name of the contract. We're not taking any ownership. We're not licensing the master. We're not taking any position on the master. We are purchasing your revenue in advance, so that music belongs to you for ever.
Wow.
I had one question there. The geeky lawyer in me came out there when I was listening to it, and this is maybe, if it's not a question some of our listeners are already thinking about, then hope maybe they'll be glad that I'm probing like this. But let's say I'm an independent artist. I decide that I do want some funding, and I select on my parameters. I'm looking for an advance like slightly on the higher end. So I maybe go to a deal of 5 years, let's say in duration, and I do want to give some futures, right? It's not just my existing catalogue. I'm willing to allow beatBread to participate in revenues earned from tracks I have not yet released, let's say.
Yep.
That all makes sense. I'm probably, my motivation for that is probably because I do want to get, as high in advance as I can get to hopefully pay for recording costs or whatever it might be. That's all well and good. I get the money, I record the tracks, things are going swimmingly. Let's say I have a bit of success with one of those new tracks, like more so than I have done over my previous catalogue, and now the record labels are circling, and before I know it, I've got deals on the table to do a record deal. but I have committed the next X many tracks to beatBread, and I'm still in for another like 4 years per se.
Yep.
What does that look like? Am I tied to beatBread? Is there ways to
No.
is there a conversation to get out of that? What does that look like?
It's not, well, it's funny you say a conversation, Jason. So I'll tell you, when we would literally go back to the days when we were still building the idea of the company and writing the contract and talking to the lawyer. So the lawyer comes in, he's been in the music business for a long time. So he going through all the list of things we need to cover in the contract. He goes, right. So what do you want to do if an artist comes to you and says they have an offer from a label? And we say, well, what would traditionally happen in the music business? You go, oh, well, that's when you rub your hands together and go, I can really make some money now, right? And then you have a big arm wrestling competition with the manager or the lawyer, and then eventually you come up with a number, and then you let them go if you're happy with what you got. And Peter, the boss, said, I definitely don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. Let's make it about math. So there is a buyout formula written in the contract. And it is math, and it's a fairly complicated bit of math, but not super complicated. But it basically looks at how much do you still owe us, how much time's elapsed, how much time has passed, how much did you make on average in the last 6 months, and then there's a little formula, and it says the buyout number is X.
Amazing.
The point being, if you want to go, it's just math, and it's not supposed to be punitive math, right? It's not supposed to say, oh, well, you want out, we're going to charge you a lot of money. It's just supposed to say, hey, you signed up to a deal. We were relying on making approximately X from that. So let's do math, trying to figure out kind of what we would have made if you'd stayed. Mm-hmm. And there's the number you get to buy out with.
Yeah, okay. So I think the important thing there to emphasize is that you're not necessarily locked in for like a minimum rights period. Sort of there are ways, and it sounds like there's like a fair way to get out of that situation if you so wanted to go and sign to the record label.
What that also allows you to do, which we've had several artists, actually probably 15% of our artists have done, is refinance your deal. So you come back to us and say, hey, I'm 18 months into a 3-year deal or a 5-year deal. It doesn't matter, but you can't do it after a month or two, but I'm a little way into this deal. Things are actually going really well. They're probably better than any of us predicted. Can you run the numbers again and see what happens if I do a fresh deal? So we sort of apply that buyout formula and make a new prediction. And if it's all there, we say, yeah, you can, you were X months in, but if you want to sign another new, and again, the choice, do you want a 2-year or 3-year or 5-year deal? If you want to sign a fresh, well, there's another check to be had if you want it.
Yeah, fantastic.
Are there any sort of challenges or pushback that beatBread has gotten from the powers that be? Or are most companies sort of eager to follow the model that you guys are laying out for independent artists?
Who do you have in mind, Tim, when you talk about the powers that be?
I'm thinking about the Universals, the Sonys, the Warners. Is there like
I don't think they've noticed us yet.
Okay.
And we're sort of happy about that. But I would say, one of the artists, we funded a sort of southern Mexican flavored rock band called Giovanni and the Hired Guns. They're with a big management company. We did a 1-year deal with them. We gave them a pretty substantial check, but it was over a 1-year term. They went and invested that. They were already doing well, which is how they could get the big check, but they specifically took a 1-year deal. They went and invested in a bunch of touring and videos and content and all these things. And then the manager said to me, I was able, having invested that money, to sign a much better deal with the label than I would have done if I hadn't gone and done all that. The labels were sniffing around when they came and took a deal from us, right? But what he used it is to, now, I guess you could say, well, the labels wouldn't like that because they had to spend more money. But I would actually argue that the labels these days are really looking for things they can take from 60 miles an hour to 90 miles an hour. Right? I go back in time, but I always used to say at labels are not very good, and I don't think ever have been particularly good at taking things from 0 to 30. That's really hard to get things started. I think labels, distributors, artist services companies, there's all sorts of people who can take an artist these days from 30 to 60. There's a real sweet spot, and it's sort of the artists that we're kind of catering to, right? And I think if you want to go from 60 to 90, it's almost no better place than a major label.
No, yeah, 100%.
Right?
It's just like that international capability.
So you could argue, we don't know, we've never had this conversation. Like I say, I don't think they've noticed us. You could argue we're sort of doing a service to the major labels because we're giving these artists funding at that early mid stage of their career which is either going to help them get to the next level or just sort of keep them where they are. But it will just, it's going to give more evidence to the labels about who they should and shouldn't sign, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think another underlying message behind what you just said is, look, as an artist, you sort of have a responsibility to take yourself from that 0 to 30 to 50. And sort of what we said at the beginning is put yourself in a position where people want to invest in you. And whether you're searching for an independent model to do that or a label, at the end of the day, you're going to have to put a bit of work in yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And like, that takes us back. Just to sort of say it again, we're talking about when you're starting out and you're on your journey, you have to hustle. Like, nobody's going to give you a handout, essentially, and whether that's doing the job with a part-time job on the side to get enough money to borrow your equipment, etc. But we're talking about once you hit a point where you do need outside investment, right? And it's at that point, I think, that that we're talking about here, and it's no longer monopolized by the record labels for all the different reasons that we've described. And I think that it's fantastic that there's a company like beatBread out there as a bona fide option for independent artists who want to maintain their independence, own their own music, and I think with this data-driven approach, it's that whatever the offer that you made, there's like a high degree of accuracy that is actually the amount of money that you should rightly have been loaned, i.e. you will pay the loan back, or you're highly likely to pay the loan back in that amount of time. I'm calling it a loan, an advance, whatever. Yeah, but yeah, it's I think it's genuinely exciting, I think, for the artists in the independent music space. We have independent distribution. There's incredible companies. You mentioned some of them. We've talked about independent distribution companies in previous episode, DistroKid, and now to have an option of genuine independent funding, I think it's like very exciting for a lot of independent artists.
So let me ask you, what world is beatBread trying to make? Or rather, what implications are you hoping come from the deals that you're making?
Peter always says more music and better music, right? Or better music and more of it. Sorry, I mangled that. Better music and more of it. Really just to give artists more options, right? We just think artist empowerment is our North Star. And the more choices you give artists, the more likely they are to come out with the right outcome, right? So being selfish about it, we would like to be in a place where nobody in music who's considering funding doesn't consider a beatBread offer, right? Of course, we'd never be stupid or arrogant enough to say, well, we'll always be the right answer. Everyone should take a beatBread deal. But you should always look at a beatBread deal.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there. Here's an important question for anyone that hasn't yet picked up on it, and you did give a helpful sort of walkthrough of all the parameters, etc., and the fact that you can opt to have a percentage of your monthly streaming income paid through to pay off your advance, and actually retain a portion of it, as you said, if you need to pay your rent, etc. What's in it for beatBread? And
we do it for the goodness of our heart.
I was going to hesitate to say what's the catch, but what's in it for beatBread?
The clue is in the name of the contract, right? Revenue share purchase agreement. So we are sharing your revenue with you. It's actually in the way it's constructed, it's actually quite similar to a record deal. So a record deal has a royalty rate, which essentially is saying this is how much you as the artist get, and this is how much we as the label get. But actually, in the beginning, what you as the artist get, you don't get, because it's going towards recouping the advance, right? Which you work on the same model. I believe, Jason, you'd know more than me, but a typical major label record deal, the artist is getting like an 18% royalty or a 20% royalty or something like that. Our royalties go from the 50s into the 90s. So on a one-year deal, it might be around 90% in the artist's favor. So what that actually means is if they earn a $10, 90 cents of, 90... Let me start that again. If they earn $10, $9 is going towards recouping the advance, and $1 is coming to us. right? On a 1-year deal. On a 2-year deal, it might be more like 80-20. On a 3-year deal, it might be more like 70-30. But the point is, it's massively stacked in the artist's favor. The majority of their income is going towards recoupment, and if the deal recoups early, that actually gets paid through to them. So imagine a 3-year deal that they're recouped in 2.5 years. For the remaining 6 months, they're going to get 70 or 75% of their income paid through to them.
Got you. Yeah.
So to answer your question, we take a share of their income for the period of the deal. That's how we make this work.
It's a partnership. It's a business.
A little bit, yeah. We're a very, very silent partner, but we're investing in their career. And I'm glad you asked how we make money, Jason, because you mentioned the word loan, and I'm sorry to pick you up on it, but it's not a loan. There's 2 reasons I'm saying that. One, because legally we can't be a lender. And so we've specifically constructed the contract so that it's not a loan. But more important, loans have interest rates attached, right? And if you don't make your payments on a loan, the amount you owe is going to start to go up.
Good point.
Right?
Yeah.
When you share your revenue with us, the amount you owe can never go up.
Got it.
There's nothing being added, right?
Yeah, that is
if your streaming drops, it might take you slightly longer to earn back what you need to earn back, but the amount you're owing is not clocking up.
Got you. Yeah, no, that is an important distinction. So yeah, we should maintain the correct terminology and advance. Yeah,
and also if I decide I want to become a chef and stop being a musician, you then can garnish my chef wages to pay out my music.
well, sorry. So that's another important point, Tim. There is no personal liability with this deal. So in a loan, you would be personally responsible, and the credit agencies of the bank are going to come and chase you down forever, right? This is an advance on your streaming income. If it takes your streaming income a long time to earn back what we advanced you, well, okay, we're still collecting. It's going to take you longer, but we're not coming after any other source of your income to get paid back.
Yeah, that's an important point as well.
It's a beautiful thing, y'all, because I know a lot of musicians and artists who are in that level, that tier that you're talking about, and they're constantly frustrated about how do I get to the next step. We just need a little bit more. And then, typically what they do is they revert to some crowdfunding, but that's hard. It's hard to...
It's really hard. And honestly, I think we've talked about this internally just because it comes up from time to time. We are not believers in crowdfunding at all. And there's a few reasons. One, because a lot of people have tried it and not very many people have made it work, right? Not on the newer end of the spectrum. If you're an established artist and you can... But the crowdfunding version that works is actually pre-selling fancy versions of your album, right? But crowdfunding where you're actually asking people, your fans, to invest hard cash in your project, I don't know. Like I say, haven't really seen anybody make it work. And if you have a hardcore fan base, sell them something, right? Sell them an exclusive piece of merch, sell them a signed piece of vinyl, sell them a numbered poster, sell them something they'll feel attached to and they'll feel good about. You can still make a good margin on it, but you haven't just asked them for their money.
That's actually a very good point, because there's probably to ask them to fund your record. That's then you're possibly exhausting some of that equity, that goodwill and equity from your fans that you could otherwise use to, if you do have another funding source, well then you've still got that fan goodwill and equity to actually, monetize and sell them things, like that they actually want. So it's that traditional sort of willing buyer, willing seller relationship, and they're getting value from things that, if they're willing to part their cash with it, then they actually want that thing. And ultimately, that's more money to more revenue for the artist.
I'm glad you guys said that, because I think too, similar to record deals, with the crowdfunding thing, I think folks often point out the large successes and then use that as the standard for how it all works. But in fact, most of them are failures when it comes to funding whatever it is. And that's similar to how record labels are, right? You think you get 1 or 2 artists that are successful, but the majority of the folks who sign the record deals are typically not successful in the way that we define it.
Right. Yeah. And that is worth stating, is like, how do you define success? But I think it's like, when a lot of artists are out there hustling and, they dream of getting the record deal, as you alluded to earlier, Matthew, they often think that getting the record deal is the end goal. But of course it's not. It's just the start of the process, and it really depends on how things go from there, which will tell the tale.
Matthew, I want to thank you for your time and joining us, and I want to give you this opportunity. If there's anything else you want to plug, if there's any like links, how can people find beatBread? You know, what's the deal?
I think we've said beatBread.com enough times, right? But I'd encourage our YouTube channel. I think is full of pretty cool stuff. I think it's youtube.com/beatBread. Shockingly, our Instagram we try and make sure has got some good artist content. Lots of artists talking about getting funded by beatBread and what it meant to them and that kind of thing. I'm sure we're on Twitter and Threads and all those other things, but YouTube and Instagram probably the place to go. Really check us out.
You mean X?
Sorry, X. Yeah, it's going to be a while before people are used to saying that, isn't it?
Talk about brand equity.
Right, exactly. So yeah, that's it, guys. I mean, I would, if you're even vaguely interested in funding and you have more than $100 a month in income, just come take a look, right? The other thing I'd say is I think we see stats that suggest that artists come and they see, a $10,000 offer and they're insulted in some cases. Like, I'm worth $1 million. How dare you? I would really encourage, and I'm sure you guys have content and there's other places you can go on the web to learn how $10,000 today could actually be really meaningful to your career, right? If you invest it correctly, if you spend it on the right things. What I'm saying is, I believe, and this is more personal than beatBread, but it's an incremental journey, right? Take a small thing and advance it and grow a bit. And then, like I said, you can always come back to us for a refinance and get some more money and then grow some more. Like the chance of somebody giving you $100,000 today. By the way, we do $100,000 advances. We did a $2 million advance last month. Like we will do those advances for people that have the data to back it up, but don't see a small number and think, well, that's just stupid, isn't it? Like nothing I can do with that. Go do the research. There are plenty of people who'll give you a marketing plan based on a $5,000 or $10,000 advance, and I think it can be meaningful.
Yeah.
But also, and the last thing I'll say, and it's really important, and I love saying this the most, if you don't need the money or you don't have a great plan, please don't take an advance from us, right? Money costs money. And you should only take an advance if you know what you're going to do with it and you think it's going to be meaningful for you.
And you will never hear a record label say that. So they want you to take that money. So, but amazing.
Yeah, no, I would just encourage everyone to go on to the beatBread website and have a little play around. It was listen to the videos, and get inspired and see if it's right for you. If there is a funding need and you want to maintain ownership of your own music, then beatBread certainly should be part of the conversation.
Well, thank you guys for listening. If you want to reach out to Matthew through us, definitely feel free to comment. You can email us. Please like the content, engage with us. If you have a question that you want answered, feel free to hit us up and we'll try to get that done for you. If you're in the New York area and you feel like you have something positive or something meaningful to add to the conversation, maybe you'll get a chance to stop by the couch. Who knows? But yes, this is another episode of The Record Shepherds, and we thank you for listening.
Yeah, and that leaves it for me to say, until the next exciting episode, continue to follow the guidance of the shepherds.
Don't be the sheep, be the goat. Bah.